Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we re-tackling one of the oldest and most intuitively appealing arguments for the existence of God. The teleological argument, also known as the argument from design. This argument has convinced millions of people throughout history, and it still shows up constantly in debates today. But does it actually work? By the end of this video, you'll understand what the argument claims, how it's evolved over centuries, and why it ultimately fails to demonstrate what it sets out to prove. Let's get into it. The teleological argument is essentially this: the universe and things within it appear to be designed for a purpose. This apparent design, the argument says, is best explained by the existence of an intelligent designer, namely God. The core logic goes something like this. The universe exhibits order, complexity, and purpose. Things that have these features are usually products of intelligent design. Therefore, the universe is probably the product of an intelligent designer, and this designer is God. It's called teleological from the Greek word telos, meaning end or purpose. The argument claims we can infer a designer just by observing goal-directed features in nature. What makes this argument so appealing is that it matches our everyday experience. When we see a watch, we know someone made it. When we see a building, we know it had an architect. So when we look at something as intricate as the human eye or as vast as the cosmos, it feels natural to think someone must have made those too. But, as we'll see, this intuition leads us astray. The teleological argument has a long history, starting way back in ancient Greece. Plato argued that the order of the cosmos required a divine craftsman. But the most famous version comes from William Paley in 1802. Paley gives us the Watchmaker Analogy. He asks us to imagine finding a watch on the ground. Even if you'd never seen one before, you'd recognize it was designed because of its intricate parts working together for a purpose. Paley argues the same applies to living things there, even more complex than watches, so they must have a designer, too. He listed examples like the human eye and bird wings, claiming these things screamed design. Then, in 1859, Charles Darwin published On the Origin of Species, and everything changed. Darwin provided a naturalistic, mechanism-natural selection that could produce apparent design without any designer. Random mutations combined with differential survival created the illusion of purposeful design through purely blind processes. This was devastating to Paley's argument. The biological complexity that seemed so obviously designed now had a competing explanation that didn't require God. Recognizing that biological design was no longer convincing, proponents shifted focus. The modern teleological argument centers on cosmological fine-tuning. The claim that the fundamental constants of physics are precisely calibrated to allow for life. For instance, if the strong nuclear force were slightly different, stars couldn't form. If the cosmological constant were different, the universe would have collapsed or expanded too quickly for galaxies to form. Apologists argue that the precise values of these constants point to a designer who wanted to create life. This is the version you'll most often encounter today. Now, let's examine why these arguments fail. I'll address both the classical biological version and the modern fine-tuning version. First, who designed the designer? This is the most fundamental objection. If complexity requires a designer, then God being supremely complex requires a designer too. And that designer requires a designer, leading to an infinite regress. The typical response is that God is a necessary being who doesn't need an explanation, but this is special pleading. If God can be complex without a designer, why can't the universe be complex without a designer? The argument undercuts itself. If we allow that some things can exist without being designed, then Occam S. Razor suggests we should prefer the universe being that thing rather than adding a whole extra, unexplained entity. Second, for biological complexity, we have a well-established, empirically supported mechanism, evolution by natural selection. This isn't speculation, it's been directly observed and is supported by genetics, paleontology, and molecular biology. Natural selection is a blind algorithm that reliably produces apparent design. Given enough time and reproduction, it will sculpt organisms that appear purpose-built for their environments. No intelligence required. The eye that Paley thought required a designer. We can trace its evolution through intermediate stages, each one advantageous at the time. Third, the fine-tuning argument has fatal flaws. Apologists claim the odds of getting life-permitting constants by chance are astronomically small. But we don't actually know that. We have a sample size of one universe. Calculating meaningful probabilities from this is impossible. It's like winning the lottery and declaring it was rigged because the odds were so low. Someone had to win. We exist to observe these constants because these are the constants that permit our existence. That's not surprising. It's selection bias. Another problem is the multiverse alternative. Many scientific theories, like string theory and eternal inflation, suggest our universe is just one of many. If there are countless universes with different physical constants, it's not surprising that at least one has the right values for life. We necessarily find ourselves in that one. You might say the multiverse is speculative. Faire en ougue. But it's at least as speculative as God, and it has the advantage of being a naturalistic hypothesis. Douglas Adams put it brilliantly with his puddle analogy. Imagine a puddle waking up one morning and thinking, "This is an interesting hole I find myself in. It fits me rather neatly. It must have been made to have me in it." This is backwards thinking. We're adapted to the universe, not the other way around. Life evolved to fit the conditions that exist. Plus, if God designed the universe for life, he did a terrible job. The vast majority of the universe is a lethal, radiation-filled vacuum. Eventuelt, most of the pre was lifeless. This looks exactly like what we'd expect from unguided natural processes, not an intelligent designer with life as a goal. Fourth, there's the problem of bad design. If an intelligent designer created organisms, why are there so many examples of poor design? The recurrent laryngeal nerve in giraffes takes a ridiculous detour down the neck and back up terrible design. But exactly what we'd expect from evolution. Our eyes are wired backwards with a blind spot. Our bodies are full of jury-rigged solutions that work just well enough. This is precisely what evolution predicts, and precisely what we shouldn't expect from a perfect designer. Finally, even if we granted the argument for a moment. It doesn't go. At best, it gets you to some kind of designer. This designer could be a committee of designers, a flawed being, an alien simulation programmer, or a deistic God who just left. The gap between the universe appears designed and the specific God of a major religion exists is enormous. So, where does that leave us? In its classical biological form, the argument is dead. Darwin killed it over 160 years ago. We have a better, more predictive, naturalistic explanation. The fine-tuning version is more sophisticated, but still fails. It relies on probability calculations we can't actually make, ignores viable alternatives, and still falls to the who designed, the designer? Objection. The argument commits a fundamental error. It mistakes our psychological tendency to see purpose with actual evidence for purpose. Humans are pattern-seeking, agency-detecting creatures. Seeing a designer in nature is a cognitive bias, not a sound inference. It solves nothing. You haven't explained complexity, you've just pushed it back a step and declared this new, more complex thing doesn't need an explanation. The teleological argument feels compelling, but feeling compelling and being logically sound are very different things. So, the argument from design has had an impressive run, but apparent design is just that, apparent. We now understand that natural processes can produce all the complexity and order we observe without any intelligence guiding them. Evolution, by natural selection, isn't just an alternative explanation, it's a better one, confirmed by mountains of evidence. At the end of the day, the teleological argument fails to provide good reasons to believe in God. If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe for more deep dives into arguments for theism. Next time, we'll be looking at the cosmological argument. Let me know in the comments which version you'd like me to tackle first, Kalam, Leibnizian, or Thomistic. Thanks for watching, and remember, always think critically.